Hello, this was not my planned follow-up, but in my last video, I ended up testing the accessibility of light and dark theme toggles using NVDA's screen reader. And after some frustration using this, I discovered a fabulous new and free accessibility checker by Silktide that happens to have a simple screen reader simulator. And I believe it's the only checker that does this. And as accessibility testing is part of usability testing, I'm particularly pleased to find a user-friendly accessibility tool that I genuinely look forward to using. It's comprehensive enough to allow me to lose some of the other accessibility add-ons that I've accumulated but hardly used over the years. And I think it's designed so well that I can imagine using this on a client call to demonstrate some of the unseen work that is done on their behalf. I recommend taking a look at the 10-minute web accessibility audit on YouTube. It was a webinar done by the CEO of Silktide, Oliver Emberton, who's very knowledgeable and eloquent and can do, of course, a much better job at explaining his tool than me. But I'm making this partly to spread the word, but also I don't have to be so modest about how useful I think this is for users like me, particularly with the screen reader. Now, this is not fully fledged and it's on mute at the moment, and it only works on the page that we're testing, but I think that's its strength. They rightly highlight its ease of use, and I think in a few minutes you'll understand how to use this screen reader. There is a video and there are these shortcut keys. But the real joy for me is just that it's there when I need it and that the functionality is confined to the web page we're testing. What I found with running NVDA's desktop app as a sighted user is that it was a little bit awkward for me, because as soon as I started the reader for testing, I wanted to go into my code editor to make some changes, run some other tests, or just look things up. And of course, it's designed to go with me and assist me with everything that I do on my computer. And of course, lack of experience is part of my problem, and there are extensions and settings to help with this. But having watched some demos by experienced blind people, I suspect it'll never be that easy for me. Also, I'm lazy when it comes to firing up desktop applications just for quick tasks. That said, I think it is important to take a look at the limitations of the screen reader. They've gone with the 80-20 rule to try and keep things simple. And an example from my last video is that I was looking at the toggles over here, and as you can see, it's reading things out, or you would hear it if it wasn't muted. But what I mentioned before, which was working on the other screen reader, is if I hovered here, the CSS hover would read this out to me. It's not in this. It doesn't work like that here. So that's removed. And also, and you can see on here, we can set the display. But if I look in the HTML, we were last time looking at more advanced stuff with ARIA labels. I was confused whether it was me, whether this was inappropriate code, or whether there was an issue with the screen reader. This won't solve it because it's not supported here. I think the main things probably to watch out for, and it's in their notes, is a couple of HTML elements, one of them being the details and summary, which I'm using here, and also the select element as well in HTML, because these work like components where they create slots. This doesn't work in the normal way, so it will miss them. It will read it if I use my mouse, but it won't work with the normal functions. But these are kind of minor things just to know about. I think overall, this is a really great tool to get more designers using screen readers. I've often thought that I should use one regularly just so it naturally becomes part of my design thinking. While I am here, I'll just go into the settings and mention something. So I reached out to Silktide, who came back to me in minutes. So I was really impressed with that because I thought there was a bug for them. And it was that I was using some Google Voices here, and they were falling silent at roughly about 280 characters. And the text was still printing on, as you can see, happens with that text effect. It seems they couldn't replicate it at first, came back to me, and they said they would pass it up, but I got back to them. I don't think it is their issue. What you get here depends on your browser and your choices. With Microsoft, and when I was using it on another browser, everything was working fine. So I think it might be an issue. If you have that, then don't report it to them, but let me know because I'll be quite interested. I need to test more. There are some other things about the speed, the typewriter effect, and I think the hide screen is really useful and it's convenient. But I think it's good if you really want to replicate the site and how the screen reader works, because it's a different experience when you already know what is due to come up, I think. If you haven't guessed already, this is a Chromium extension, so that's how you get it. And I was able to add that to Microsoft Edge as well, and I'm sure it's true of other Chromium browsers. As of beginning of June 2024, there's no Firefox extension, but it is in their sites, as are, and I got this from the webinar, some other additions. But I guess a lot of it is going to depend on the attention this receives. Everybody's given it a 5-star so far, but it's early. And obviously they put a lot of time into this. And I would guess that this needs to work as a good marketing tool for Silktide's business, where they have, sophisticated premium checkers that monitor and report on full sites and go beyond accessibility. Now, I avoid endorsing businesses, but talking about this, I don't think is any different to talking about WebAIM's Wave, which I've talked about before, or IBM's Equal Access Toolbar, or Google's Lighthouse. I do have a positive awareness of Silktide, which goes back to 2011, when they were a voice of reason when I was despairing about how the UK was going to implement the new cookie law, and the BBC actually featured them a year on. They were not afraid to take on the Information Commission's office to talk about how it really wasn't protecting users with privacy, but just making usability worse. And they really did quietly abandon what they were doing. But I followed some other of their contents since then. There's some good YouTube videos. I thought I might relate with them better because they're from the same area of the UK as where I'm from. But this is also true of their US branch. If you look on their tools, there's lots of videos in the various sections here, as you can see here. And there's also, although it's not complete, a little course that you can go on. And these are really on the money as far as I'm concerned. And I kind of like the way that their focus tends to lean a little bit more towards the making us better designers by aiding us to empathize with more users, rather than the dull legal finger wagging virtue signal inside of accessibility, which appears I don't really need to be convinced that making the web work for all is a good thing. Let me quickly go through the tools that we have here. So the first thing I did, vanity, of course, is to go and see how I passed on the test with this one. It's set to automate at the beginning here, and it's WCAG 2.1 AA, which is the good standard, and the standard that I think more of us will need to apply to our websites because of the new European law that's coming in 2025. But it's not really the way to do this. These tests can only pick up maybe 20-25% of what really needs to be looked out for. So what's more useful is their assisted checks, which I think there are over 200 of those, and they will ask us the right questions. So here it's picking up on the fact that I have some audio in the HTML here, and it's asking me whether we have a text alternative, which we do in this case. I did make this work on this particular page, and this page only worked on the excellent rating of AAA, but this is actually not true, because in order, we have video content, and it might not pick up on those because we replace it with an image, but that video doesn't have sign language with it, so we wouldn't really pass on that. But I think what was really useful about this is it highlighted within about 10 minutes a big error that I had made earlier on, and did a video on it. So I'll just quickly cover that. So if I go here to AAA, now it is a higher standard. We'll see we are failing on this regular page, and mainly with this explain opening in a new tab, and it shows us where I have this open in a new tab, which of course is confusing for screen readers for this to be happening, and I entirely forgot about it. I talked a lot about the fact that I used to open everything that was external in a new tab. That is not good. It breaks the back button. It's not what we really ideally want, but could justify it on certain pages because it might break up their listening of the podcast over here. So what I tried to do is to add in something which might indicate that this link is slightly different by adding this on. But I forgot the non-sighted people. And what I found is when I looked here at the notes here, It gave me why it matters. It gave me where I need to refer to with the W3C documents. It also gave me all of these code things on how to fix things. One of them I partly use in a way, this one where I'm selecting the target blank and using after here to add in this icon. Obviously, they're suggesting that it should be something that screen readers can read, but I was able to make that homepage pass by keeping to what I had here and using one of their other suggestions, which was, if I just get to it, using the ARIA label on this. Anyway, it's given me a lot more food for thought and made me think again about this, and it was very useful, the tool for that. Just thought that was quite cool. Okay, let me go down. I've mentioned that there is a bit of a course here. We'll talk about these three things. I'll just skim over them. These are really for empathy. So there's a dyslexia simulator over here. I think I have a little bit of that, particularly when it comes to numbers. It's in my family. It's not kind of such this experience, but you swap around things, whether it's easy to read. And I think if you get big blocks of text, and that becomes even more difficult with that. We've got a color blindness checker over here. And I had one of these, but it didn't give me this information. Now it tells me sort of proportions here. So I thought that was quite useful. We have also other impaired visions that we can implement here, such as loss of peripheral vision. Might be useful to see how you've chunked up your content, how that might impact on people. I think that's useful. The next tool that I'll probably use quite a lot is to just check when it's long articles that I've got my headers in the right order. It's quite difficult to see when you're in the code, but with this we can quickly go to it and actually find that in the code as well. And let me go to the next one, landmarks. This was quite useful because I'm really only aware of the landmarks due to using the screen reader, where it would read out banner, landmark, heading, blah, blah, and go on from there. And this is something which the screen readers will mark out as their sections based on your HTML automatically. So I've not put something in, but we can check whether this, what is thought of as content information, is correct and go to the link and see, whether we're getting this kind of right. And of course, with ARIA labels, we can add in other content areas. I found it quite interesting. I won't mention the site, but people might guess, knowing my background, if you know me, that I was looking at a site that's going through a redesign at the moment where a lot of people are into accessibility. I was quite surprised really with thinking about this. Generally with my sites, the main area just runs logically and I don't need a separate area, a separate region for different content most of the time, or an aside, if you like, with complementary information. But I thought this site really could do with it. And why I think that is because if we go to the next tool, the focus order, on mine is pretty simple. As long as I've got it in the right order, it's going down the page, the main content, really simple. On this site, what happened is in the focused order, it went in the right order, but you shot, if you're tabbing, from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, back to the top of the page, depending on the content was there. If they'd regioned it off, it would have stopped that experience, I think. So I found that quite interesting and I learned from this tool. I think I've mentioned everything on the screen reader. Finally, I'll talk about this. Well, there's not much in the images. We've made these decorative because that seems sensible here. Basically, decorative means that we put in the alt tag correctly, but we've left it blank. And there's, unless I come up with a description for us that where I can keep a straight face while I do it, I'm going to leave that blank because it reads out Nathan Wrigley. It doesn't need to read it again, particularly as it says Nathan here again. What I found interesting, and I can show you on this site, is that it could pick up on the hidden images that I've got here. So on my alternative, it was picked up. Now I've been using online Wave to test things, and it can't pick out on different structures between light and dark modes. So it made me realize that this is quite useful to be able to do that. I think it's definitely worth looking at their video here. It's really short, but it makes the point. I think something I worry about with AI filling in alt text is that it describes the whole image with, beautiful prose, but it's really not relevant. It's how relevant that image is to the information that the user needs in the context of the site. And particularly when it might come to diagrams, you don't necessarily need a description of the diagram. The diagram is there to tell people what they need to do next. And I can see that AI won't necessarily do that job very well. Okay, finally, let me move on to the last thing that is here, and that is the color picker, the contrast, so we can see how that works here. So I can go in and pick out another color. and see where it's failing, depending on whether the text is large and what level that it's going to fail on. And I think that probably brings me to the end. I hope that was quite useful. If you do decide to use this and you like the tool, then please do give them a positive review. I'm sure it will help and will help us, because they'll have the time to justify in adding in extra things, which I'm sure they want to do. Anyway, thanks again, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye-bye.